inevitable spread, the new warning from health officials about how the coronavirus outbreak could impact the U.S. The CDC saying, quote, this could be bad. Lawmakers now concerned we're not ready as cases top 80,000 worldwide, the first U.S. service member diagnosed overseas. American students ordered home from studying abroad. Landmarks and hotels on lockdown. We'll speak to an official from the CDC right here this morning.
Debate chaos in South Carolina. Frontrunner Bernie Sanders faces a flurry of attacks.
Bernie, in fact, hasn't passed much of anything.
A bunch of broken promises that sound good on bumper stickers.
I'm hearing my name mentioned a little bit tonight. I wonder why.
Joe Biden promises a comeback.
I will win South Carolina.
Just 3 days to go until the pivotal primary.
Winter storm warning. 13 states on alert as heavy snow sweeps across the country. States from Missouri to Maine bracing. Ginger is tracking the latest.
Breaking his silence. The man in the middle of that missing sibling mystery now speaking to ABC News. His wife under arrest. What he's saying about his stepchildren.
Just call him Harry. How he is now introducing himself as the Duke makes his first return to the UK since his royal exit. The new images this morning.
And passing the torch, the historic change at Disney. CEO Bob Iger handing over the reins to Bob Chapek. From Star Wars to the Avengers,
Assemble.
to Frozen to Baby Yoda. The new chapter for the company and for a legendary career.
Live in Times Square, this is Good Morning America.
And we certainly do say good morning, America. Bob Iger, 15 years as the CEO, more than 4 decades with the company.
Yeah, it has been an incredibly amazing run. Not quite over yet. We'll be executive chairman for another year and a half. It is a very busy Wednesday morning. We're coming off that Democratic debate in South Carolina last night. It was a raucous one. Bernie Sanders on the firing line, and for the first time, they debated that issue on so many of our minds, coronavirus. It came right after a new warning from the CDC saying its spread here is inevitable and Americans should prepare for, quote, significant disruptions in their lives.
Overseas, George, a U.S. soldier in South Korea has now become the first American service member infected, and fears hitting Wall Street hard again. With the Dow dropping nearly 880 points, there are now more than 81,000 cases worldwide. Let's go to Steve Osensami outside CDC headquarters in Atlanta with more this morning. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you, Michael. One of the things that has authorities here at the CDC concerned are the outbreaks that are taking place across the world, outbreaks outside of Asia that they cannot directly tie back to Asia.
The CDC this morning is putting it plainly that it's not a question of if the virus will spread in the United States, but a matter of when.
We are asking the American public to work with us to prepare in the expectation that this could be bad.
The people are getting better.
And while the president is trying to calm the panic, insisting that the U.S. is well prepared for any outbreak, lawmakers on Capitol Hill weren't so convinced.
Sorry, I don't understand the question. Head of Homeland Security, do we have enough respirators or not?
The government says it could need around 300 million masks and respirators to fight an outbreak, but only has about 30 million on hand. At a 3M plant in South Dakota where the masks are made, they're working around the clock, and it's still not enough. The frustration in Washington is overflowing.
This is not the time to try to shortchange the American people.
A vaccine is still at least several months away, and for now, if there's an outbreak, health officials are recommending Americans work harder to clean surfaces and to distance themselves from crowds. Meanwhile, overseas, the number of cases is rising. In South Korea, the U.S. military is announcing it's on high alert as the first U.S. service member has tested positive for the virus. That 23-year-old soldier is now in self-quarantine at his off-base residence. And in Italy, there have been more than 320 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. American schools like Syracuse and Fairfield University are closing their study abroad programs in the country. Grace Palmieri and Lauren Tassi are studying in Florence with the University of Illinois and Illinois State. They have been told not to travel to Milan.
Most of the information that we're getting is from our advisors here. We're just kind of trying to take whatever precautions they tell us to. We were both supposed to travel this weekend to Milan. and had to cancel our trips because we were told that it's probably best that we stay home.
At a hotel in Spain's Canary Islands, the doors are chained shut, and nearly 1,000 tourists there have been ordered to stay in their rooms because an Italian guest is sick with the virus.
The government is not only trying to calm the panic, but also the nervousness in the economic markets. One thing we keep hearing is that the number of deaths worldwide from the coronavirus is far below the number of deaths in this country from the flu this season alone. Robin?
Got to keep that in mind, Steve. Thank you. The CDC's Principal Deputy Director, Dr. Ann Schuchat, is good enough to join us now live from Atlanta. We appreciate your time this morning. We know how busy you are, and we've also heard about the strong warning from your agency. So can you please break down how dire the situation is right now?
This is a relatively new virus, and we're learning every day more and more about it. One of the things we've learned is that it's quite transmissible. Beyond the outbreak in China, the outbreak on the cruise ship, we now have outbreaks in Europe, outbreaks in other countries in Asia, and we recognize that our very strong measures here in the United States to contain the virus, to keep it limited to very low numbers, may not hold for the long haul. We don't know exactly what will occur here, but the transmissibility has us wanting to be prepared. We also know that the virus is not as severe as we first feared in the reports out of Hubei province. What we're seeing in terms of severe cases is primarily the elderly and people with chronic conditions like diabetes or heart disease that are hardly hit. What we aren't seeing a lot of disease in children, which is a feature of flu. So we're still learning, and we want to be prepared. And the outbreaks in Europe and in South Korea and the Middle East have made us want to raise our attention.
And how are you being prepared? Because President Trump is saying that everything is under control. Do you share that right now? And what are the steps going forward?
We work very closely with state and local public health partners. We actually practice for pandemics and threats like this. And so we've been intensifying our communication and outreach to the health departments, because when outbreaks hit, it's really on that front line, city, county, or state, that public health is on call. So we're equipping them with guidance about how to address this threat should it arrive in their communities, and working on their strategies. We're also reaching out to the healthcare sector and to businesses and educational settings. It's really a question of making sure that those plans we had for a potential pandemic are updated and ready to implement should we need them.
And what is your advice for people who are watching this morning, precautions that they can take?
Well, this is a respiratory virus, and we think it's spread through respiratory droplets, coughs and sneezes and so forth. So those sensible measures we talk about every year with the flu are important steps that you can take. Cover your mouth and nose when you cough or sneeze, stay home when you're sick, and wash your hands. It's a great reminder that washing your hands is a good prevention step for respiratory viruses.
Can never say that enough. Dr. Ann Schuchat, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, Robin, thank you. We're going to move on now to last night's chaotic showdown in South Carolina. The Democratic debate was a free-for-all, with frontrunner Bernie Sanders taking heat, Michael Bloomberg too, as Joe Biden staked his claim to the state. Mary Bruce was in Charleston for all the action. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, this debate last night was the last best chance for the candidates to try and take each other on before the critical primary here on Saturday and before the race goes national next Tuesday. And you could sense the desperation on the stage last night. It was chaotic and feisty, the candidates taking every chance they could to try and stunt Bernie Sanders' momentum. Overnight, the candidates piling on the frontrunner.
Bernie, in fact, hasn't passed much of anything.
I do not think that this is the best person to lead the ticket.
Progressives have got one shot, and we need to spend it with a leader who will get something done.
I'm hearing my name mentioned a little bit tonight. I wonder why.
In a messy and combative fight, his rivals pounced on his policies, but Bernie Sanders stood firm behind his agenda.
Do we think health care for all, Pete, is some kind of radical communist idea. Do we think raising the minimum wage to a living wage? The truth is, Pete, that the American people support my agenda. That is why I am beating Trump in virtually every poll that has done, and why I will defeat him.
Eager to stunt Sanders' momentum, Joe Biden with a bold declaration about Saturday's must-win primary.
I intend to win South Carolina, and I will win the African-American vote here in South Carolina.
Biden took on Sanders' record on gun reform.
If I'm elected and I'm coming for you and gun manufacturers, I'm going to take you on and I'm going to beat you. I'm the only one who's done it.
The senator forced to defend himself.
Because of all these disgusting and horrific mass shootings, the American people now understand that we must be aggressive on gun safety, not be dictated to by the NRA.
And Biden ripped into Sanders for his recent praise of Cuban dictator Fidel Castro and his literacy program.
This man said that, in fact, he did not condemn what they did.
That is untrue, categorically untrue. Authoritarianism of any stripe is bad. But that is different than saying that governments occasionally do things that are good.
Look,
Pete Buttigieg with a warning.
I am not looking forward to a scenario where it comes down to Donald Trump with his nostalgia for the social order of the 1950s and Bernie Sanders with the nostalgia for the revolutionary politics of the 1960s.
Eager for a do-over, Michael Bloomberg tried to make light of his bruising first debate.
I'm surprised they show up, because I would have thought after I did such a good job in beating them last week that they'd be a little bit afraid to do that.
But he was still a top target.
I don't care how much money Mayor Bloomberg has. The core of the Democratic Party will never trust him.
In a blistering attack, Elizabeth Warren described being fired from her teaching job when she became pregnant at 21 and compared it to Bloomberg allegedly encouraging a pregnant employee to get an abortion.
I didn't have a union to protect me, and I didn't have any federal law on my side. So I packed up my stuff and I went home. At least I didn't have a boss who said to me, "Kill it," the way that Mayor Bloomberg
never
alleged
said
to
that.
have said to one of his pregnant employees.
Bloomberg adamantly denies the allegation.
I never said it. Period. End of story. Look, categorically never said it.
Bloomberg argued he's best positioned to help the party succeed, but raised eyebrows when he appeared to say he bought the Democratic majority.
All of the new Democrats that came in, put Nancy Pelosi in charge, and gave the Congress the ability to control this president, I got them.
He quickly corrected himself, but the slip doing nothing to quell critics who say he's trying to buy the race.
Mayor Bloomberg has a solid and strong and enthusiastic base of support. Problem is, they're all billionaires.
Now, Joe Biden is expected to get a big boost here this morning. Sources tell us that Congressman Jim Clyburn is poised to endorse his old friend. He is the leading Democratic voice here and as close as it gets to a kingmaker in this state. George.
Mary Bruce, thanks very much. Let's get more on this now from our chief White House correspondent, John Carl. And John, it was, as I said earlier, just a real free-for-all last night. But you could see the focus on Bernie Sanders and all the opponents up there on the stage basically know if he wins on Saturday in South Carolina, he's on a solid path to the nomination.
No question about it, George. And you could see the other candidates acting as if they were running out of time. This was a chaotic, loud, bruising debate. Sanders came under fire in a way that he has never come under fire before. And for the first time, he actually seemed a little rattled, especially when the crowd started booing. But at the same time, George, it was such a free-for-all that nobody on that stage really stood out as the primary alternative to Bernie Sanders. And it may actually have been, in a way, a good night for him because Elizabeth Warren, once again, did him a favor by relentlessly and in a nonstop way going after Michael Bloomberg.
Yeah, now it's up to the voters in South Carolina on Saturday. Meantime, we did hear for the first time in one of these debates coronavirus discussed. The president's been putting a lot of focus on that as well, tweeting all the way back on his plane from India.
Yeah, first of all, it was odd that the coronavirus subject didn't come up until the debate was almost over. When it did, the Democrats were actually united on this one, criticizing Donald Trump for, among other things, proposing cuts to the funding of the CDC. But, George, the president tweeted on the way back saying, CDC and my administration are doing a great job of handling coronavirus. that obviously is a statement that is at the very best premature.
Yeah, okay, John Carl, thanks very much. Of course, next Tuesday night, Super Tuesday, 16 contests, essentially a national primary. We're going to have special coverage here at ABC. I'll be anchoring with our political team starting at 8 Eastern. Michael?
All right, George, that debate was messy yesterday, which leads us to the winter blast that is hitting the Midwest. Millions are facing a messy commute from Missouri to Maine. Ginger's tracking the very latest. Good morning, Ginger.
Good morning, Michael. Snow is flying in Chicago this morning, making for a wet and in some places slick commute. We're seeing the sun just come up there with that snow flying. And it was much more snow in central Kansas. That is close to 13 inches falling again. Now, as this all moves east, I want to show you Detroit, 600 schools are closed today. And that's because through the day, you'll start to get into some of the moderate and heavy bands. Heavy rain is going to be on the front end of this, making its way through here tonight through early tomorrow. And then it is the wind behind here that's going to cause lake effect snow, talking feet of it, Robin, for some people, and very windy conditions right here on the East Coast.
All right, Ginger, thank you. We have a major news now from the business world. Bob Iger stepping down after 15 years as CEO of Disney. That is our parent company. He's taking on a new role in a legendary career that has shaped this company and the media landscape. Longtime member of the Disney family, Bob Chapek, taking the news, being named the new CEO. Rebecca Jarvis is here with these details. It caught a lot of people by surprise.
It did, Robin, and it's the end of an era. What an era it has been. Bob Iger is one of the most powerful people in entertainment. He's led Disney to unprecedented success, leading major acquisitions like Pixar and Marvel, launching Disney Plus and expanding the company's theme parks, announcing he will hand over the reins effective immediately to Bob Chapek.
An historic day for the Walt Disney Company. Bob Iger, just last year named Time's Business Person of the Year, stepping down as CEO.
The company's in great shape, and that's a great time to turn the reins over to somebody else. When you think about it, I can't think of a better time.
Passing the torch to Disney's longtime head of parks and resorts, Bob Chapek.
It's hard to believe that I'm sitting here with Bob Iger, thinking about how I fill those enormous shoes that he's created for me.
After 15 years in the top job at Disney, Iger has overseen tremendous growth, expanding the company's theme parks, opening Shanghai Disney Resort, and leading the charge on major acquisitions.
Cue the music.
Including Pixar,
To infinity and beyond!
Marvel,
Avengers!
Assemble.
and Lucasfilm, expanding the Disney universe to include Star Wars.
May the Force be with you.
Most recently, Iger striking a landmark deal to purchase 21st Century Fox.
Outstanding.
Giving Disney a majority stake in Hulu.
Hulu is here.
And launching Disney's streaming platform, Disney Plus.
May the Force be with us.
A one-stop shop for all things Disney, including an outlet for news stories.
You are a Mandalorian.
I'm proud of the fact that this is among the most admired companies in the world. To have the opportunity to be the CEO of a company that is viewed that way has just been, as a life experience, something that I will forever appreciate, and I'm just so deeply, deeply grateful for.
And Iger isn't leaving Disney just yet. He'll stay on as executive chairman through the end of next year. He says he'll use that time to lead Disney's creative endeavors and to help Bob Chapek transition into his new role.
I tell you what, he's been a good friend to all of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Rebecca. We are following a lot of other stories this morning, including a new twist in that missing sibling mystery. What their stepfather tells our reporter. We're going to have that, but first let's go back to Ginger.
And let's get straight to the rainy cities, brought to you by CarMax.
It's no big deal, really. That little vent that won't stay open, it's not like the engine doesn't work. Just position the other vents so they're aimed at you. It's no big deal. Except it is. That little vent that won't stay open is like a little window of your automotive happiness boarded shut. That's why the vent is one more thing we check before a car can be a certified CarMax car. Because that's the way it should be. CarMax.
Stormwatch 7 on your side on this weather alert day. Major changes taking place throughout the day today. We've got fog, dense fog this morning, the advisory until 9 o'clock, so much of the area. And then for this afternoon, some rain and even some thunderstorms late in the day, probably after 6 or 8 p.m. On the warm side, from the 40s to the upper 50s this afternoon, and then much colder coming our way for late today and tomorrow. High temperature just 44. We're 38, the high temperature on Saturday with sunshine.
In 1950, King's Hawaiian was born from an irresistibly delicious idea. In 2020, the Jones family also had some delicious ideas.
What if we make King's Hawaiian breakfast sandwiches?